Hi, this is Brent, and in today's video we're going to go through the Save Data tutorial in the Develop in Swift tutorials. And here we're going to introduce SwiftData and how you can save and persist data between when you launch the app. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go ahead and open Xcode, create a new project, and make sure you have iOS selected and app. Choose next. We're going to call this birthdays. And for our purposes, we're not going to use the storage setup yet. What we're doing is we're learning the basics, and then we will manually add SwiftData support. So for now, make sure we just have selected none for the storage. Go ahead and choose next. Save it. We'll create a new project. First thing we need to do is create a new type. We'll call it friend. And so we'll click on the birthdays folder, right click, choose new file from template, and we'll select a Swift file. Choose next, and we'll call this friend. In our friend file, we want to create a struct called friend. And we're going to have two properties. We have var name, which is a string, and var birthday, which is a date. The Swift date type is used to represent a specific point in time. It can even, you can use it to get down to fractions of a second. Let's go to our content view, and here let's declare a property. We'll do a state variable, and it will be an array, so we'll call it friends, and it's going to be an array of the friend type, and currently we'll just set it to an empty array. To show some sample data, well, let's go ahead and add some new friends. So within the square brackets, we're going to type friend, and then open parenthesis, and then the autocomplete is going to suggest name and birthday, so tab, and then we can just pick some names. For the birthday, let's go ahead and use a date. There's a method called .now, and that represents the current date and time when the app runs. Let's add another friend. So we add a comma and then a new line, and we say friend, and we'll say go with Jenny Court. And then for the date, let's use a method, and we're going to say time interval since 1970. And then it asks for an interval in milliseconds, and for now we're just going to say 0. So this time interval since 1970, this is something that is found in programming quite a bit. It is just a reference date. And so what you're doing is saying from this specific time, which is a known point in the past, we're going to start. And at this case, we're passing in 0. So that means we are starting with this known date back in 1970. In the body of our view, let's go ahead and replace this, and let's create a list. And we're going to pass in our friends array, and then we need to use an ID. And so for now, we're going to use the name of the property, and we're going to say friend in, and then so at the moment, we're using, whenever you pass an ID for the list, it needs to be unique. So right now we're temporarily using the person's name, which of course you could have friends with the same name. So we'll fix that later. But for now, just know that the names will be unique for now based on how we're using it. In our list, let's use a text. And actually, on the tutorial, let's create a HStack, and then we'll have a text, and we'll use the friend name. So now we've got the name showing up. For the date, so let's add a spacer. And remember what that does is it pushes everything to the sides. So now the next item, we want to show a text. We're going to use the friend.birthday. And then we're going to use the format method. And what that does is it allows us to pass in how we want the date represented. So whether you have the day, the month, the year, that sort of thing. And so for our purposes, we're going to use dot date time, which is a style of formatting. And then we're going to say dot month. And then we're going to pass in dot wide. And then we're going to say dot day. And then dot year. So now what we've done is using the format method, we're telling it that for the date we want to display the month, and we're using the wide format, meaning the full name of the month, not abbreviated or anything. And then we use the full day and the full year. Now, depending on where you live, you're in the time zone you live, this date is either December 31st, 1969 or January 1st, 1970. And so the reason for the difference is that it's based on the time zone you're in. And so this time interval since 1970, in my case, it shows up as December 31st, 1969. Now what we want to do is embed the list inside a navigation stack. So I'm going to right click on the list, choose embed, and then I'm going to say navigation stack. What this does is it allows us to use the navigation stack to display a title at the top, as well as reference toolbars and buttons and navigation bars. And so in this tutorial, we're not actually using the navigation stack to navigate to another screen, but instead we want to use it to display information about what we have on the screen. So right now, under the list, at the end of the list, we want to add a modifier that says navigation title, and then we'll pass in birthdays. So this gives us a way of referencing the UI that's built in when you use the navigation stack. Because we're referencing the navigation stack, the UI will behave differently. So notice when you scroll up, it puts the title up at the top. And so we get a lot of benefit from using that. We want to be able to add more friends. And to do that, let's give ourselves a couple more state variables. So we're going to have a state private var, and we'll call it new name, and we'll just set it to an empty string. And then we'll have another state variable private var, and we'll call it new date, and we'll just default to date.now. And so when we reference a new date, it's going to start with today's date. We want to use another modifier on the list. It's called safe area inset. What that does is allows us to anchor content to any one of the sides of the application. And in our case, we want to put it to dot bottom, and then press tab. And then remember, there's a shortcut. If you have where it's expecting content and it has this closure, what you do is you press return, and it gives you the brackets, and now we can enter our code. And so what we're doing is we are adding content that's going to be anchored to the bottom of the screen. Let's start with a V stack, and we're going to use the alignment. And for the alignment, we're going to say dot center, and then put a comma, and then do spacing. And we're going to set it to 20. And then if I press tab, I go to the closure, and then if I press return, now it's added the curly braces for me, and now I can add the rest of my UI. Let's go ahead and put text, and we're going to say new birthday, and then we're going to format it. We're going to say font, dot headline. Next, we're going to use a date picker. And the date picker allows us to then choose the date that we want to use to add for the birthday. So for now, we're going to say date picker, and then we're going to say selection. Whenever you have the selection made from the date picker, we're going to bind it to new date. And then we have a curly brace, and inside here we can add some more UI. We can say text field, and we're going to say a name, and then comma text, and the text that's entered is going to be bound to, you got it, new name. And then let's stylize it. We can say text field style, and then dot rounded border. So now we've got a rounded border for our name that we enter at the bottom. Now we're going to fix the spacing here in a minute, but notice that everything is anchored to the bottom because we're using the safe area inset. Sweet. On the date picker, we want to make sure the user can only select a date that is in the past. We don't want to choose a date that's in the future. So in order to enforce that, after the new date, add a comma, and then we're going to say in, and then we're going to say date dot distant past dot 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 date dot now, and then comma, and then for displayed components, we're going to say dot date. So notice what happened is before we were showing a date and time, because remember the date type represents a very specific point in time. Here we're only interested in accessing the date portion of it, and so we're only going to show the date. Now what we've done is we're saying when we select a date, we can choose from anywhere into the distant past. And notice I can't move forward on my date. I can only go backward. And from there you can then select a date and then enter a name. And we'll just say Doug Rogers. Now, at the moment, the date, we're not doing anything with this information. So let's fix that. Let's add a button below our date picker, and we'll call it save. And then in the action, we're going to say let new friend equal friend. And then the name is going to be the new name, and the birthday is going to be the new date. Then on the button, we're going to say, let's add a modifier. We'll set it up for bold. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. B-O-L-D, bold. After we've created the new friend, we need to add them to the friends array. So we're going to say friends.append new friend. Okay, so let's test it out. We're going to say Doug Rogers, and we're going to pick a date. And they're going to be, oh, I don't know. Wait, in the past. October 24, that sounds good. 2004, sweet. And then choose save. And notice they show up. They've been added. Now we need to reset this so that we don't show the previous name. So let's go ahead and set new name equals to empty string and new date equals to dot now. So now when we add another person, we're going to say Mary Anderson, and their date, we'll pick a date. So far we're just hanging out with little kids, I don't know. Let's hang out with some older people. May 30th, 1999. And then choose save. And then notice that resets once we've added another person. Now, one thing you've noticed is when we updated our code, our sample data only has 2 people in it, but we're not persisting beyond when the app is running. So that's the whole point of working with SwiftData. Before we do that, let's update our styles a little bit on the VStack itself. Remember, when you click next to a curly brace, it highlights the opening brace or the corresponding brace. So in our case, when I clicked here, notice that highlighted. So that tells me I'm at the end of the VStack. So here we're going to add some padding, and then notice how that cleaned that up a little bit. And then we can set dot background, and we're going to say bar. And what that does is it adds some styling as if it was the bottom bar. And so again, these are some built-in formatting that we inherit when we reference some of these styles. Let's run this in the simulator. So up here at the top, go ahead and choose run. Then it's going to compile. And then we've got the simulator. And now we can go ahead and add another person. So we can say Russ Derrickson and pick a date, 2004, February, and February 29th. That's a good date. And then choose save. Again, when we run the app a second time, so let's go back and I click stop. And then I run again in the simulator. Notice we have the same problem we saw here in the preview, which is our data is not persisting. We're only able to see the sample data that's hard-coded in. We want to be able to save data once we've entered new information and have it persist so that as long as the app is installed, it's going to maintain that data every time you run it. In order to do that, let's move our simulator out of the way. Go ahead and choose stop, and you can minimize this bottom so we have a little more room. We need to prepare our friend type to be used with SwiftData. So to do that, we come up here to the top, and under the import foundation, we're going to say import SwiftData. Next, we're going to add a macro, which is a modifier at the top of the struct, and we're going to call it model. And what will happen is the model adds code that's referenced that runs when this compiles. We don't actually see the code that's associated with it, but it's expecting certain things. And at the moment, we've got some errors here, and it's saying it requires an initializer. And also the other thing is you can't use a struct as a model object. So we're going to fix that. We need to change from a struct to a class. So we'll say class friend. One of the reasons the differences between a struct and a class is a class has a unique ID that is built in when you reference a class. And when you're using an object that's saved in SwiftData, it needs to have a unique ID and a unique value that's built in, and a class requires that. A struct does not have that information, and so you switch to class. Now the other error, notice that it's saying it requires an initializer. So the advantage of a struct is that the compiler automatically creates an initializer so that when it creates a new friend, it knows what values to assign automatically. But with a class, you have to define that yourself. Go ahead and add some space, and we're going to create an init function. And notice when you do this that Xcode, the autocomplete, is going to know that, oh, it needs an initializer, and so we'll go ahead and press tab and it fills it in for us. So now we've satisfied all the requirements and the error has gone away. We now need to connect SwiftData to our application by going to the birthday app. And this is, remember, this is the entry point for the application. And we need to, at the top, we need to say import SwiftData. And then on the content view, we need to pass in a modifier called model container. And it's the model container for, and then we pass in friend.self. So what this does is that the SwiftUI takes the data from SwiftData and it's able to automatically pull information from the data storage and reference and update the SwiftUI, because we're telling it for the container, we need to reference and understand what a friend object is. And so friend.self refers to the type friend rather than a specific instance of friend. And so it helps it understand how to map data when you save and recall data in storage. Now let's go to the content view. And here on the content view at the top, we need to import SwiftData. And then for our preview to work with SwiftData, we need to come down to the preview and add the model container. Whoops, spell it right. Container for, and again we pass in the friend.self, and then we pass in a reference that says in memory and set that to true. Now the reason we specify in memory as true, so that the in memory refers to the storage. So data is stored only as long as the app is in memory. That way it'll help with the preview. Again, this is unique to the preview that we have showing up here on the right. Next, we need to update our friends array. And instead of using a state property, what we want is to call this, it's called query. And what it will do is it will pull data from SwiftData. Now, we can't use sample data in the same way, so we're going to remove that. We're going to fix that here in a minute. Notice we're getting some errors. But for now, just understand that in order for us to access the SwiftData directly, we change this variable to query. So then it pulls the friends array from the SwiftData storage. To address some of these other errors, we need to add what is called a context. And in this case, we use environment. And then we pass in, we do a / model context. And it's a private var called context. So the model context, it's the connection between the view and the model container. So now we can pull data, we can add, update, and delete items. And so the model container was what we added in the beginning at the birthdays app. And so now we're pulling that in so we can, within our SwiftUI view here, we can now update to get the information. So down here, notice that we don't have the friends array in the same way. We need to reference it. And let's change that. Instead of referencing the friends array directly, we want to reference the context. So if we say context, and then instead of append, we're actually going to say context, and we're going to use insert. So now that will reference that. Now, in order to have our sample data working again, we can use what's called a task modifier. And if we go to Where is that? That is at the bottom of the safe area. We're going to call task and then have opening curly brace. And here we're now going to recreate the data that we need. So we're going to pass in some sample data for the friends into the context. So we're going to say context dot insert, and then we're going to say friend, and whoops, we'll say name, and again you can pick any name you want. We're just going to pick a date. So we're going to say now, and then whoops, and then here we want to add another context dot insert, and we're going to say friend, and we're going to say name, and we'll go with Jenny Court. And then the birthday, we're going to say date, time, interval since 1970. Whoops. Time, interval, I want to click on 1970 and 0. So now we've got our sample data working. Okay. The thing to understand here is that the context is saving data to the container, which is where SwiftData keeps the information, and we have the query which pulls information from the friends array. And so we don't access the friends, we don't query, we don't update, insert or append to the friends array directly. What we do is instead we insert the information to the context, which is the container where the data is stored, and then this friends array gets pulled from that. And so now task is method on a view that gets run before the view is displayed. And so that's where we're able to pass in some sample data. Let's go ahead and run this in the simulator and see how it works. So here we've got some information. Let's go ahead and add another person. We can say Emily Johnson, pick a date, any date. Whoops, again, we can only go in the past. Okay, and then, so now they have a date, and we click save. And so now they're added to the array. Now let's go ahead and stop the app, and let's run it one more time. Okay, notice we've got this showing up. The data is adding this twice. Now, the reason for that is that we are referencing task, and the task runs every time the app runs, and so we're inserting data into our context every time. And so now it's doubling up. We're running into some errors because the ID, the name, is showing up twice, and so it's running into all sorts of problems. So we're going to fix that here. One thing we can do is come up to the list, and instead we're using, so initially we started with passing a unique ID of the name. Well, as you add multiple references to the same name, this starts to fall down, and so we can actually delete that. So instead, the list is now going to show there's already a built-in unique ID when you're using SwiftData. So for now, we'll update that. The other thing we can do is notice that when we had multiple people on there, sometimes the order that they were shown was not the same. So you can actually set what is the sort order. And if we come up here to our query, the friends query, we can actually pass into an open parentheses. We can say sort, and we're going to pass in, we want to sort by friend.birthday. So now when the array loads, notice how the preview refreshed. It's now sorting our friends by their birth date, with the oldest person at the top and then the next oldest. And so now if we add another person and we say Emily Johnson, we can set a date. And if we put the date in between these two, then it should work better. So go ahead and click save. And so now notice it's sorting them and it puts them based on their birthday. Next, we want to add some additional UI. We want to figure out if a person has a birthday today, we want to indicate that in the app. So first, let's go over to the friend object. And here we're going to add a computed property. We're going to call it var is birthday today. And that's going to return a Boolean. And in the curly braces, we're going to say calendar.current.isDate in today. And then we say birthday. So this property will return true if the birthday is date in today. And that's a method that's on the calendar. So the calendar takes this date, this absolute point of time, and it associates it with years, months, and so then you can pull out the information for that. And you also reference calendar because your app could be running in a different locale, a different standard around the world, and based on the user's calendar settings, it'll be displayed in a format that they're familiar with. And so that's the other advantage of using the calendar to calculate these things for you. Let's go back to the content view. I want to minimize this for a second. And what we want to do is on the H stack where we have the name, what we want is to put an image if their birthday is today. So we're going to say if friend.isBirthday today, then we are going to show an image, and we're going to use the system name, and we're going to use birthday.cake. And so notice that the preview showed up because it's updated because our birthday for Elton is today. And so this already shows up, so we know that that's working. The other thing we want to do is if their birthday is today, we want to put them in bold. So we're going to say bold, and we're only going to, it'll show bold if friend.isBirthday today, if that returns true. So now they're bolded, and now you can see that. Sweet. The tutorial also references there's a lot of other symbols in the SF symbols. And remember, you can get to that if you check View, Show Library. And then over here on the right is the symbols. And here you could start looking for all sorts of symbols you could reference for birthday cake, gift, all sorts of things that you could swap out. Let's go ahead and remove the task where we're having our sample data, because we don't want this sample data to show up every time. So now, when we run the app, let's notice one thing. The app is going to have the data that was saved in our SwiftData container, and it's going to be there until you remove it. So one way to do that is you can come up here to Device and choose Erase All Content and Settings, and that'll clear everything out. Or you could hit the Home button, and then for the birthdays, if you long press and then click Remove from App and you say Delete App and you confirm it, then if you go back and run the app again, now it's set up and we don't have our sample data. And you can go ahead and add a person's date, birthday. So we could say Ashley Simmons, and we'll say their birthday's today, and it shows up with the birthday cake and in bold. All right, that's everything for this tutorial. Let's go ahead and check our understanding and see how we did. So we'll scroll all the way down. Okay, what does persistence mean? That means never running out of storage space, saving to the cloud, saving data beyond the running lifetime of an app. Well, it's going to be this one. That just means it's saving it beyond the current program, ready to be picked up again once it's completed. These other items, never running out of storage, doesn't really apply. Saving to the cloud, that's something you could do with the data, but persistence just means it lives beyond the current program and gets reloaded when you open the app again. Which of these has all the pieces of a Swift date? So here, I didn't mention, I don't know if I mentioned everything explicitly, but SwiftDate has the date as well as the time. So here we've got something with time, and so date is an absolute point in time, and that even means using the down to the millisecond. Next, query automatically updates when model objects change. I'm going to say true. I'm 99.8% sure. Yes, query provides live updates to SwiftUI. All right, great job. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.